3 questions. How many times a week do you try to persuade someone else of something? How many times a week does someone try to persuade you? And how many times a week do you attempt to persuade yourself of something? We can't get away from persuasive speech. So, whether or not it's your cup of tea or not, it's important to understand persuasive speech and the principles behind creating a persuasive presentation. Key concepts are persuasion, motivation, and social judgment theory, and how these concepts will affect your persuasive speech preparation. Persuasion is a part of our everyday lives, but our focus is on creating a persuasive speech. So, understanding what it is you're trying to accomplish is a great place to start. Now, it's possible that if I mention any subject to a group of 25 people, there will be a variety of opinions about the topic. We all have different experiences that shape our thoughts, different upbringings, different cultural backgrounds and influences. With this reality in mind, any attempt at persuasion needs to start with humility, or the perspective that you are going to share your persuasive perspective, but in all reality, you could learn from those you are attempting to persuade. What you should really try to accomplish is to do your part in sharing in ethical leadership, cultural competence, and community engagement. The first key concept to think about is persuasion. Persuasion is the process or the steps you go through to attempt to change others' attitudes, beliefs, values, or behaviors. Persuasion is usually a continuum for most of us. We seldom hear someone say something and then just jump on his or her bandwagon. Persuasion is usually a gradual process moving eventually toward acting on our beliefs. Ultimately, you might say that people are not fully convinced until they act on their beliefs of their own free will. The ancient Greek Aristotle, who structured much of how we still organize speeches, described the process of persuasion occurring through the use of logos, ethos, and pathos. This means persuasion likely occurs when people present logical evidence and reasoning for a new position. Persuasion likely occurs when people provide credible sources, presented in a way that the people you're speaking to feel you have their best intentions in mind. Persuasion likely occurs when you're also able to ethically motivate people by properly appealing to their emotions as well as to their intellect. Motivation is the next key concept to understand. Whereas persuasion describes the process, motivation describes how the process can happen. Essentially, to motivate people to progress along the persuasion continuum, you can try to make people uncomfortable with their current position, with information and realities of the problem. You can appeal to one of the needs that you see identified in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can let people know of the positive outcomes of the new position. Or the opposite, you can help people see the tragedy that awaits inaction. Most likely, you will and should include most or all of these choices of how to motivate your listeners responsibly into your presentation. The third key concept to understand is social judgment theory. So remember that persuasion is a continuum. This theory just states this: every listener to your persuasive presentation will fit into a category of rejection, non-commitment, or acceptance. Based on these 3 categories of rejection, non-commitment, or acceptance, ask yourself the question, of who you should aim your speech at. And based on the composition of your particular audience, how should you construct your arguments, proofs, and present your motivation? So, how does all of this information, these key concepts, affect how you will create your persuasive speech? First, your general purpose is not to inform, it is to persuade. Your specific purpose expresses where you want your audience to end up after listening to your presentation. Your central idea is a clear expression of that end goal. Next, based on your topic and your central idea, use the social judgment theory to determine whether you will need to be very cautious and deliberate in your approach with lots of evidence and backing, or if your audience is fairly convinced of your position but needs to be challenged to act on their beliefs. Finally, for this speech, more than any other, you are going to have to purposely think about and plan how you will use the 4 different approaches to motivation to move your listeners from their current thinking to a new place. Understanding what persuasion really is, how important motivation is to persuasive speeches, and grasping the concept of social judgment theory and making your speech audience-centered based on the makeup of this particular audience are key to getting started on creating your next persuasive presentation. With this in mind, I am persuaded you can be successful. See you in the next video.